and welcome to Tremco Live, where we're socially distant but technically connected. I'm Marcy Tyler, one of your hosts for this broadcast.
And I'm Paul Hoogenboom, your other host, and I'm the president of Tremco Construction Products with Marcy, a tremendous collection of brands, products, systems, and of course, mostly people all over the world.
Absolutely. Our people all over the world. If you're new to us today, welcome to our broadcast. This is, I think it's 42nd. This is our 42nd broadcast.
Okay.
So Paul and I have been up here doing this for a while now. Every week, we like to come to you live, talk about design challenges, talk about different themes each month, and of course, most importantly, just wind down your week with you.
That's our goal, right? It's an easy 30 minutes, and you'll take something away very, very useful.
Yes, that's definitely our goal. So as always, give us your feedback. Let us know if you want to be a part of it. Let us know what that question that you have on your mind so that we can help answer it. You know, we tend to kick off our program talking about the weather, but it's just so sunny and beautiful today that we just have to say it again because we're not used to it here in Cleveland.
Right. I think our observation was sunniest like ever.
Yeah.
And little do we know we needed a pandemic to bring sunshine to Cleveland.
Yep, exactly.
I'll take no pandemic next winter.
I know.
Gray sky.
Gray sky. There you go. You heard that.
Right. Back to normal.
You heard that right from Paul. So yeah, when my kids were little, we used to soak. We called it soaking up the sun. We'd find that little bit of sunshine coming in the house, and we just would lay in it. So. Yes, definitely enjoying this. So if you've been joining us every week in the month of February, we had a We Love Education theme for the month of February. So obviously it won't end in February, but we wanted to highlight education, bring on certain guests and talk about different ways that we can continue to educate the industry. I haven't forgot about you. If you gave me some suggestions on our call to action in an earlier broadcast about ways that you want to reach out to the industry. So more to come on that, and I'll definitely be following up with all of you on that. We are absolutely dedicated to education in any way that we can, you know, continue to broadcast, obviously through Tremco Live and in other ways as well.
We have tremendous investment, AIA, continuing education credits, hosting people, hosting, dedicated hosting for organizations. I can go on and on and on, but it's absolutely core.
Yes, it absolutely is. Another thing that we want to make sure that everyone's well aware of is we do want to hear your questions as well. So I know our broadcast is brief. If we aren't able to answer your questions during the broadcast live, I'll be sure to follow up with you. So keep those questions coming in. Today we're talking all about building commissioning. So we're pretty excited about that as a topic, and you may have some questions related to it. So please definitely share those with us if you do. Wanted to be able to kind of kick it off with a few slides, as we always do. And once again, that highlighting all the different systems that we get to so proudly represent, and of course, our people. We're very proud to be able to sit up here in front of all of you to represent all of our colleagues, coworkers, and you know, our industry friends as well. Paul, lots of great information when we think about building commissioning, and I you know, near and dear to me, I had to bring up our test facility, right? Because when we think about building commissioning, and our guest is going to talk a lot more about it, of course, but I couldn't help but want to say, you know, we're 100% dedicated to what we can do in order to support performance-based testing, and just a few pictures here, of course, of what we like to do over there.
Yeah, I think even telling our testing history, which starts what, 2010 or so, and even that could take hours.
Yeah.
So, but and of course, right before our call, I was quizzing you about what was next.
Yes, you were.
And I had a suggestion.
You did.
So
you did. So
we're always building, Marcy, on. I think our cadence is one big breakthrough every 2 or 3 years of creating test capability where there really hasn't been any.
Yeah.
So that we can test entire systems to failure.
Yeah.
And just get, instead of what I call inferred feedback from how things perform in the field, let's make it empirical in our test lab.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was letting Paul know that we've got some new people over at our test facility. I'm meeting with them on Tuesday, so we'll talk through. We're planning on talking through some of the ideas that we've had in the past, and you know, pick their brain as to what ideas they have. If you aren't familiar with what we're doing over there, we wanted to make sure we at least highlighted it here with a few slides, but we are focused on system testing, right? So a lot of what we do, very close to where Paul and I sit today over in R&D, is focused on material testing, right? Different ways that we can be very innovative with our materials and our products. and and how they come together is a great way that we can look at that at our test facility. So adding in those rail windows, adding in all those other building envelope enclosure areas, facade anchors, transitions, those are the things we really want to be able to focus on and open up the doors to you to be able to test what you are concerned about.
Yeah, and I think there's always two types of testing, right? One is I think we're trying to understand systems as a whole, but the other is job or site specific.
Yeah.
And we really want to emphasize that it's a great best practice if you can test all that before you begin construction.
Yes.
I think we've probably said it already 20 or 50 times on this show
so.
that it's generally sequence of installation that trips things up.
Yes.
And the other thing that Tremco really takes a lot of pride in, Marcy, is to provide, when we're done, the 3D animation that goes with sequence of installation. That can be a best practice at the start of every day on the job site.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can help with a lot of things, right? So everyone's on the same page as to how something comes together, and it can also help when there's language barriers too. So if we have that animated sequencing, it'll be very clear as to what we're looking at from a detailing perspective as well. Just to kind of highlight some of the things that we're looking at, we love being very innovative with our approach to looking at different ways that we can test our systems. We do project-specific stuff. We love thought leadership too. If you have that design challenge you've always wanted to test, please reach out to me. We want to be able to open up our doors. We've got COVID protocol that we can handle and definitely be very cautious and safe. But we want you to be able to then take that testing and those lessons learned out to the industry so we can educate people as much as possible. I love featuring this one here. I probably showed this a couple times, but in this test, we went 4 times greater than what code's requiring and still had a successful test. We like to go way above and beyond code for a variety of reasons. One, safety factors, right? Because we don't know exactly what might occur or there might be differences in installation. We want to be able to understand where those points of concerns could exist and then be able to really make sure that everyone involved knows about them. As we look at our 50th broadcast coming here in 8 more Fridays, we're going to come to you live from the test facility because we want to be able to feature this thermal chamber. We're really excited about this possibility to be able to now take that air and water leakage testing and kind of basically put it in an environmental chamber and see what kind of thermal resistance we're going to get holistically. So just some basic facts there about the capabilities. So I won't go into that because that's not what today's all about, but it's definitely something we're really excited about.
That's going to be exciting to talk about that. That's been years in the making.
Yes, it has. It has. So, 8 more broadcasts from today. We'll be sitting there live. To kick us off, I also like to give a poll, kind of find out where all of you are at today as our guests. So today's question, let me pull it up here for all of you, is how many of you have had issues on a project that I've shared here? So if you could go ahead and vote right now, and you can choose more than one. This is all anonymous. We're not going to let anybody know that you've had these issues. So some of these issues are maybe new untested building materials, right? So something new on the market that you've had some issues with or concerns. Complex geometries, problem with detailing. What about lack of modeling, reviewing, testing, or even mock-ups, and then lack of defined building performance expectations? And I think that's huge. So if you guys could go ahead and start answering that for us right now, that would be great. Just to get a kind of level set as to, your experiences that you've had as it relates to issues on projects. So Paul, I know, we're dedicated with that facility and with our feet on the street to try to handle all of these things before it even gets to a job site. But you know what? There's inevitably going to be a problem, but that's where we put the, the rubber to the road, right? We're going to be there for you no matter what.
Yeah, and I think you raised a great point, right? For sometimes uncontrollable reasons or whatever, right? "Quote unquote" stuff happens.
Yeah.
And we'll be there.
Yeah.
And we'll figure it out. We'll get it corrected.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll close that poll. Thank you so much for everyone that participated. And we'll go ahead and share those results with all of you right now so you can see how everyone answered. So a good amount of different percentages as to those issues that you've seen on projects. Now, our topic for today is building enclosure commissioning. And I think one of the main goals is to be able to have a pathway of communication so that as many of those issues that you're seeing can get solved and remedied before we even begin construction. So We'll go ahead and hide that poll, get back to our slides, and welcome our guest on for today. So Brian, if you are there with us, there you are. Welcome to Tremco Live. How are you? We are very excited to have you today. So what's going on in Boston today?
Well, it's sunny here, just like it is where you are.
Nice.
It's always nice. You don't usually get too many of those days in the middle of, well, end of February.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So once again, we're so excited to have you be a part of Tremco Live. If you don't realize it, Brian is a returning guest to our program.
Always nice to be here.
Yes, we're very glad to have you. So as I'm just getting the slides back up there on screen for you, hang on a second. There we go. Can you see them okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So obviously we are excited to have you as a return guest. You visited with us back in September, talking to us a little bit about building commissioning back then too, and how one of our products, Purglaze ETA, was there to help you solve some of those connectivity issues. So why don't you kick it off with us today? Give us some background about yourself and of course Gail.
Sure. I mean, I've been doing building envelope commissioning for close to 20 years now. Different forms. Obviously, commissioning has changed over the last 20 years, become a much more systematic process, and I think it's also being more widely accepted within the industry. So I'm a registered architect first and foremost, and then kind of practiced or specialized in the commissioning side of the industry. I've chaired the Boston BTEC Building Enclosure Council for several years and been involved in the national group, and also involved with the training program for national certification for commissioning. So it's been involved for a while now.
Well, congratulations on all of that, because being involved is definitely so important. So we're really excited, and you know, congratulations on all that support that you do contribute in the industry.
It's one of the things that we try to do at Gale. We have registered engineers and architects, and we try to stay involved in a lot of the different industry groups, because it's important to know what's going on in the industry, and also important to be part of that information sharing. So Gale itself, we're located in Weymouth, so that's where I'm speaking from you today. So Weymouth, Massachusetts, and we have offices in New Hampshire, Connecticut, Virginia, Maryland, and Florida. So we're pretty much located on the Eastern Seaboard, and top to bottom, basically. If you want to go on to the next couple slides, I can quickly go through a little bit more about us. This goes. So in addition to commissioning, which we'll talk about here, I'm in the building enclosure design and consulting group, and we specialize in the exterior skin of the building, from the waterproofing up the walls, the windows, and the roof, which is kind of what we were talking about a little bit before, that connectivity of the different elements in the building envelope. Also at Gale, we have engineers who specialize in aviation. So we do a lot of general aviation airfields and civil engineering at those locations. We also have a civil engineering group, a structural group, and a athletics group. So we do a lot of artificial turfs and things like that.
It sounds like a good cohesive partnership here, Paul.
You just have to get into artificial turfs next in track and fields.
There you go. You heard that, Paul.
Okay.
So, I mean, with building envelope commissioning, the commissioning really begins as what we've seen over the years is, because the energy requirements, trying to reduce energy usage, and we're seeing mechanical systems get tighter and tighter, and building envelopes getting tighter. And because of that, the air and moisture infiltration that used to occur in buildings and used to be able to be forgiven and dried out really is unforgivable now. And there's no capacity for that moisture and air to live within the system. It ends up creating mold and other bad effects of a building. So as we're starting to see tighter envelope skins, we're also seeing construction times dwindle. So buildings are being built faster and quicker. A lot of times packages are released early so that the construction is ongoing while the design process is ongoing. And all of that can lead to specific problems. And the Building Enclosure Commissioning provides a process to review that the owner's project requirements for the envelope are going to be consistent throughout the design process. So from the design and into construction, we're reviewing it to make sure that the end performance of the building is what the owner decided and requested in the very beginning of the project. As we know, there's a lot of changes during construction between either manufacturers or we'll say value engineering of different items, and just changes in the field to deal with ongoing construction. That can cause a lot of things that sometimes don't get tied back to what the owner is looking for. It can lead to unexpected performance requirements at the end of the project. So it just provides you with a process to make sure that you're constantly going back and making sure that the decisions that are made still are providing the same performance that the owner is looking for.
So it's not, I mean, it's not new, but I think the process of orchestrating it and kind of laying it all out is what's new. Would that be a fair comment?
Exactly. You know, I have a larger commissioning presentation. We kind of go through the history of that. It wasn't really until 2010 or so you're starting to see air barriers being required, as well as you know, the commissioning process starting to be outlined. But 20 years ago, we were still reviewing documents for an owner as a third-party reviewer, and you're still doing some periodic site visits. So some of the projects that used to go from a peer review / design construction visit review is now more involved. It's a more processed entity from beginning to end.
Perfect. And that's a great comment there. We tried to take your 117 slide presentation into 15 minutes. So Brian has committed to coming back, and we'll set up a time in April sometime where he's going to give his full presentation to our audience. So thank you for being able to do that. I remember probably back in 2010 when people were meeting at ASTM, and that room was packed when you guys were coming up with the ASTM guidelines for building enclosure commissioning. Never saw such a packed room at ASTM before in my life.
There's a lot of good people working on that, and it's an ever-evolving process. But as we talked about before, you know, commissioning is important because what we're trying to do is reduce the energy consumption of buildings. It's the only way to reduce greenhouse, some of the greenhouse effects, and to get to some of the carbon neutral goals that the AIA and other entities have set as the guidelines over the next 20 to 30 years. So, you know, when you look at the Department of Energy saying that 40% of energy consumption is from buildings, air leakage, and that air leakage can account for as much as 43% of heating loss or 20% of cooling loss. So it's important to be able to control the air movement within the building to be able to control the energy that's being used by the building. And if we don't do it right, we end up with water infiltration and air infiltration, which can lead to poor air quality issues, mold growth, and other imbalances in the HVAC system that can cause problems. We were just at a hospital the other day that had a negative pressurized room for clean room for containment, and because of the air leakage, their systems were a little out of whack, and they were 3 times more under pressure than they needed to be, so that it was nearly impossible to open up the door to get into the space because the suction was so great. So you really need to pay attention to how that building envelope is controlled.
It's interesting that you say that. When I took some air barrier installer training up in Boston, actually, at the hotel they hosted it in, when you opened up the front door of the hotel, it blew like everything off the front table. So it was a perfect example to talk about pressurization and how you want to make sure you equalize it so that you don't have that kind of thing happening. That's for sure. Now, as a panelist on our Tremco Live today, you weren't able to answer the polling question, and I'm sure you would have had quite a few of those boxes checked. And I know that's a key reason and a key benefit of having building enclosure commissioning. So thanks for sharing all that information with us.
It is, and we'll go into a little bit of the detailing issues when we in the next couple slides here. The commissioning process is really important. Is really, you know, throughout the life of the construction project. Occasionally, we'll see that the commissioning agent is thought about just as you're going out to bid. So when you get brought in at 100% construction documents, it's kind of a little late. You know, it's much harder to be able to really look at the design and see if it's caught everything, because you've already had that cost impact. If you want to go to the next slide. Really important that, you know, as you come in at the early design phases, your ability to make a change is much easier, right? The wall systems are just being selected, the roof systems are just being thought through. You can make those changes, and the design hasn't really been incorporated yet. There's not a lot of effort on the architect's side to make those changes. And as you get closer and closer to that bidding phase and the end of construction documents, there's a lot more costs, right? At first, it's going to be cost from the architect to do renovations and changes to the drawings. But as you get into construction, now you're talking about actual costs on the contractor side. Materials might have been ordered, delay in the schedule because you have to for additional material to come. There's all sorts of things where it just becomes much more difficult. The last thing you want to be doing is making those changes, you know, while they're actually standing in front of the spot on the site. Because at that point, you really have no control over what you're going to be able to do for detailing. So it's really important that you start early and you're consistently there throughout the project to just provide a third-party eye.
Well, I think that's important, you know, showing that there is all those stages. There's a lot that goes on before you even get to the job site, and then there's stuff that continues on after completion. One of the questions we just got in was if you could put your finger on one issue that you've had with building commissioning, is it because people aren't starting soon enough? You know, getting ahead of it in the pre-design stage?
It can be a very big part. Yeah, definitely. You want, you know, once the design gets to that, you know, CD phase, you're already bought into all the systems. And if you haven't considered the constructability of it or the compatibility of all the elements, it can be very difficult at that point to make any changes. And you kind of are already starting to buy into the systems that you're going to be dealing with. And it's important that those are maybe vetted out earlier. Ease of construction, for instance, is really important. Making sure that you look at the sequencing. One of the things that we look at during design phases is, you know, is the detailing constructible? You want to make sure that the contractors who are going to build it can do it in the phasing that they're going to need to. And we're not trying to ever show that you're, you know, better or worse than anyone else, but you're just trying to show that there are other ways that things can be built, and that you're looking at it again from a sequencing and constructability purpose. Sometimes you see things that change during construction, right? In this space, you've got a room for an installer to get in to do spray foam on the inside of the building, but by the time the steel gets located and the concrete gets poured, the tolerances created a gap that's maybe 3 or 4 inches big. Much more difficult to get the spray apparatus and manpower into that space. So just trying to make sure that you consider access is important. One of the most important things that we find is the coordination of the trades. So one of the common thing you see in shop drawings is by others. Well, if you don't see who owns what, you may get to a case where there's you know, a wall and a roof that don't come together properly. So having a coordination meeting where you can sit down and look at each component, see who owns what part of the system. You know, here we're showing a roof vapor barrier and an air barrier, trying to get that full seal. And making sure we understand who's coming in first, so who overlaps who is really important. And being able to work those out before they get on site and before they're starting to actually install it. You know, it makes everybody be able to play by the same rules and have the same understanding of what's anticipated or expected on the project. You know, shop drawing reviews are critical. A lot of times, again, that's where you can see these things that are by others, or maybe how sequencing or construction changes between different contractors impact each other, because they don't always look at it, right? The window shop drawings would come in from the windows point of view, the air barrier is going to come from someone else's, the cladding going to come from somebody else's. You want to make sure that they're all showing the same type of interfacing, because that's usually where you see most of the problems. And just like you were showing earlier in your mock-ups, mock-up testing is critical. If you haven't built the system before, it's worth testing. Let's make sure that, you know, the contractor understands what's being looked for, that the architecture details work the way they're intended to. So whether it's mock-up testing in laboratory or on site, it's really important to have that as part of the project, especially if you have unique systems or unique components or unique configurations, the way those things go together.
Well, we hear that a lot too, just about constructability, right? You know, what does it end up looking like in the end? You know, do things meet up, right? And we've had a couple meetings here recently, Paul, on Friday afternoons where we found errors in some of the drawings on different projects, and you know that can come about. So we want to help out with that as well.
Yeah, it's been interesting as I've been getting educated on how prevalent that is, and we're starting to work. You and I are working on some projects about how can we help find those and correct those very early in the process.
Right. Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that you would hire a commissioning agent, is to help look at those. A lot of times the architects are very busy in a very tight schedule, and so they're looking at interior finishes, layouts, floor plans, dealing with the owner and the last minute changes, and sometimes the enclosure can be somewhat of an afterthought. And so it's important to have that third party eye, just making sure that it's still being, those detailed problems can be, you know, addressed early before it goes out to bid.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think we talked early on with you, you know, as we're going through all these different phases of building commissioning, you know, obviously working very collaboratively with someone like yourself, and of course with Gail, you know, what can we do, and you know, how can we assist in this whole process? We want to be, you know, collaborative in that approach, of course.
So, I mean, the manufacturer representatives are always important on a project. You want to make sure that the installers are familiar with the products and the materials. So there's always the quality control or the contractor training. That's, you know, a critical aspect, that they're familiar with the material. But also the coordination meetings, we like to have the air barrier installer there, or the roofing contractor and the roofing manufacturer there, to make sure that when you sit down with the architect, the owner, and the contractor, so you walk through what the process is going to be, what the expectations are going to be, they have the opportunity to, you know, agree and make sure that you know, their thoughts and perspectives are also taken into account. So I think, as we said before, you know, the availability of the manufacturers to be on site is really important.
And I think being able to walk through, you know, all those different stages together, I think is going to be a key part of that success. So who do you think, you know, who's supposed to be involved in these building enclosure commissioning meetings, and who should be involved?
Well, the commissioning meetings are going to occur throughout the project. And so you're going to end up having just about everybody involved in the project. You know, definitely the owner and the owner's representatives. In the beginning of commission, that might be the users as well, or the people who are paying for the building, because they're going to have a say in what the performance is going to be. And it's also going to include the architect and their engineers. It's going to include the commissioning agent themselves, but also once the contractor and the manufacturer get on board, they're also going to be incorporated within the construction phase of the commissioning. So it ends up being a very wide group, and who attends each meeting may depend upon the topics being addressed. But you'll see the same group going through the project. And then we have specific meetings for, you know, the kickoff of the roofing, or the kickoff of the air barriers, or the kickoff of the waterproofing, where you might focus on a specific aspect of the building.
And then I know there is some specific things that you addressed in your training. So we're going to be pretty excited about having you be able to go through this in greater detail. But here's just some highlights, things to consider as we start looking at that building enclosure specification.
Well, one of the things we want to make sure is that, you know, commissioning is not testing, right? So you can't just come out at the end of the project and test the building and say, all right, I passed, right? It really is involved from the beginning of design through construction, including site visits and those mock-ups. One of the common questions we receive is, you know, where does the commissioning specifications go? And then when you do look at testing, where do I put the testing specifications? And a lot of times it depends on the local project or government agencies you might be dealing with. So in Massachusetts, we have specific laws for on public bids for trade contractors. So you may need to have certain testing requirements within a trade section, because that's the only area of the spec that they have to look at. So it really depends on the project specific information, but a lot of times we try to put it in one place, and we want to make sure that we're not repeating information more than once in the specification. So either it goes in the commissioning spec and we refer to it in the other sections, or vice versa, you refer the commissioning spec out to individual sections. Another common question is how much testing? And the amount of testing that we include really is dependent upon the budget, and also how standard is the systems being used. So if I'm using something that's been in the marketplace for 20 plus years, and we know it's tried and true, then maybe I don't have to test it as much. I just am going to do a little QA/QC testing on the contractor's install. If I'm doing a very custom or unitized system, I may want to do some lab testing on unitizers before they get on site, because once they come on site, they're going to be put up very quickly. If I'm going to be doing something very custom like this curtain wall, maybe you want to do more testing on site because I'm going to use the system in a different way than maybe it's normally used. And so it's important that you look at the specific project and, what are the risks, and we want to test the risk to reduce that.
One of the questions we just got in was, so say you have an assembly test that has been tested, prior to, how often do you then require it on the project?
So a lot of times you want to do periodic testing.
What was that? Sorry.
For a Windows system, we'll typically look at maybe 2 or 3 test days. We'll do one early. So in the first 5% of construction, you want to test and make sure that everything's been vetted out, that the installation is going well, and then you come back periodically to go and retest it to make sure that the level of quality install has not gone down, and that maybe there's some specific or unique situations later in the building that we want to test those, make sure that maybe it's a little different than the typical. So, a small building, 3 to 4 days of testing, starting at the 5%, 25, 50, 75 would make sense along those lines.
Okay, very good. Another question we got, as we're sitting here, they're coming in, but we've talked a lot about like who needs to be involved, what kind of testing is there. I know we said there's a lot of information that you could share with us, but I guess if there's one final thing you'd want to share, with your many years of experience, is there one final message you'd want to give, to us as a manufacturer or anybody listening today? I know that's a tough one.
Sorry. So those coordination meetings really are critical. You want to, once you look at design documents, the coordination meetings and the shop drawing review is the first time all the trades are sitting down together. They're going to build the building together, so you really want to sit down and make sure that the documents that they're providing shop drawings are correct, that they match up with the design details, and that they're coordinated through each other. And so being able to sit down at a table, flip through those details with the manufacturer and the contractors and make sure that the process and the sequencing makes sense is critical. And that really is if you're only going to do one part of commissioning, that would be the part to do. But it really is a more elongated process for a good reason. And our commissioning specification, our building enclosure commissioning presentation will go through that in more detail.
Perfect. And I know you've listed a variety of different resources as well, so we can make these slides available to everyone as a thank you afterwards. So thanks for providing the information we had today, as well as these resources here for more information. And I know I Googled building commissioning, enclosure commissioning, and a Construction Specifier Institute article came up from you, Brian, right. Written in 2016. So that's another great resource of information, but we'll definitely connect with Brian and be able to bring this content to all of you, hopefully in April. So Brian, thank you so much for being able to join us today. I know our time with you was brief, but it was definitely very informative.
I'm very happy to have joined, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Lots of great information here today, Paul. We're pretty excited about anything that we can do to get involved, and of course how we can share that information out there as much as possible is just as critical.
Yeah, Brian's an exciting guest because I think we talk a lot about our testing, but Brian is really that final point of making it all happen in the field. And there is a certain and significant and critical amount of field testing that he really talked about today that as a best practice should be done.
Absolutely. So definitely supporting of that and very excited about that. So So that rounds off our February We Love Education, but that doesn't mean we're done talking about education. So there's been some posts out there all about this great educational series that we are doing in March. So we've got a bunch of our guest presenters here. So if you want more information on that, we have it on our LinkedIn, but you can also email me as well. I'm Tyler@TremcoInc.com. We've got 4 guests, Jason Weiland of Klein & Hoffman. We've got Mark Howell of BECS. We've got Gene Keaton from KDENT, and then we've got Mark Santos from Desmond. So lots of great information all about the 6 sides of the structure. And then we'll bring Brian back in April to do some training on building commissioning.
Do we have a theme for March?
We do. Our theme for March is all about versus. So if you think about going in like a lion or out like a lamb, you know how we used to always talk about that from a weather perspective, we thought it'd be fun for March to focus on versus. So what does that mean? We're going to put different technologies to the test. We're going to compare different technologies. We're going to kind of have one combat against another and talk about features and benefits. We always like to say there's features and benefits with everything that we have. So let's make sure we're utilizing the right system for the right application, and that's what our focus will be in March. So if you have ideas about versus, different technologies you want us to compare, now's the time to let me know. You can see my email up there right now. If you want to join in the conversation in the month of March, let us know. We really appreciate any and all of your involvement. And with that, that concludes our February of Tremco Live.
Thanks, everybody. See you next Friday.
Thank you.